call this meeting of the State Allocation Board to order. Can the Secretary call the roll?
Senator Lowenthal?
Here.
Senator Hancock? Senator Huff?
Here.
Assemblymember Buchanan?
Here.
Scott Harvey?
Present.
Kathleen Moore?
Here.
Cynthia Bryant?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first item up for business is the consent calendar. Is there anybody want to pull anything out for the consent calendar? Senator?
The administrative cost item, tab 5, page 19, the quote from the consent calendar. What I would really like is pull the item and request that it's the expenditure report, that a more detailed expenditure report of administrative costs be on the specials agenda on the February SAB meeting to have it more. I felt it because I didn't really understand where the money was being just listed, but didn't tell us what was being spent. I would like a more detailed report for full board approval, discussion, and approval.
Okay. Mr. Harvey?
On that point, I really, Senator, have no issue with you having a more robust report, but my understanding is that these are dollars that are directly appropriated by the legislature, and this is simply a report of that action. We get to allocate the school construction dollars, that's something we do, but on this one, the action has taken place. If you would like more detail, that's one thing, but I'm not sure it needs action.
Detail at all. I'm not even saying that there's administrative code. The education code section states that the SAB shall determine the amounts necessary for the administration of this program. So this should be a discussion item. And I'm not even saying that. I'm just not sure what this thing is.
Rob, did you have a comment on that?
We can bring back a detailed budget. I will also ask our sister agencies that are funded from the program to provide detailed expenditures, and we can bring that back. This is a ministerial action. The budget, our budgets all go through the regular budget process, and this is then brought before the board. But more than happy to bring back detail. Again, Kathleen Moore's organization within the Department of Education receives funding out of this, as well as the California School Finance Authority. And then there are some expenditures over at the State Controller's Office associated with handling our funds.
Okay, we can do that. I apologize because this is obviously the first meeting I've chaired, and so I was looking at the script and kind of didn't do this quite right. We should have had a separate for the minutes request. Are there any changes on the minutes? I'll do that next. I took it out of order. We did the consent calendar. We're removing we'll go ahead and remove the budget item, put it on February.
Oh, I have another comment or a question I'd like to make about item 5, as it's removed and put over till February. And then I have to say that this is forward looking, pretty much. I was struck by the fact that we have 4 agencies, all of whom have to have their hands and eyes on these documents, and that we end up spending $17 million on this. And really would like to know in these very difficult financial times if we have looked at or can look at how we could streamline that. I think it would also the Office of the School Architect, or the State Architect looks at it. So many people look at these things, and if we are going to put people to work, we want things to move much more rapidly than they have been. There have been stories about the state, how long it is taking things to move from desk to desk. And some organizations have brought to my attention this group called LEAN, L-E-A-N, that I guess Toyota started, which helps agencies streamline their administrative procedures and do more one-stops. And it just seemed to me that this might be a good time to look forward and see if there's a way that we can move the money faster.
And it's a good suggestion. So that, we would include that in the budget item next time?
Yeah.
A discussion? Okay. That sounds good. So is there a motion on the consent calendar? Second?
I have a one item that I'll be abstaining from the El Carmen High School District consent items and voting on all remaining items.
Okay. All right. Do we need a roll call or step?
Just voice.
With, without objection? Okay. Thank you.
If we can step back to the minutes.
Yeah.
The minutes of our November 4th meeting are ready for your approval.
I'll move the minutes.
Second. All those in favor? I'm abstaining from the minutes since I wasn't here. Okay. Do we have enough? Do we have enough? I don't mind voting on it if I have to. We'll leave it open till we get the rest of our members here.
I would like to bring one correction to your attention that Sophia was good enough to catch. We have a minor typo on page 4 of our minutes. It just indicates that the school district had billions of dollars worth of projects when it's in fact billions of dollars of projects.
They're only hoping it was billions.
So, yeah, on four schools, that's quite a bit to swallow. Anyway, so offer that as a correction.
Okay. We'll deem it open, but to be adopted the way you just described it. Okay, so tab 3, the executive officer statement. Mr. Cook.
Right. Given that we just wrapped up a year and we're starting a new calendar year, wanted to go through some of the numbers that this board dealt with, this board and the Office of Public School Construction dealt with last year. In a very difficult year, we actually were able to release last year $1.83 billion, which is, if you'd asked me whether we'd been able to do that in January a year ago, I would have thought you were crazy. But we've been lucky enough to get $2.4 billion worth of funding over the last year, and we've released a substantial amount of that. Also, we've executed nearly 400 unfunded approvals here at this board, in the just short of $2 billion worth of unfunded approvals. And then the various applications that we've received at OPSC over the year is just under 1,400 various types. And then there's a further breakdown of the types of work that we've dealt with over this year. It's we've given tough times. We've actually had quite a bit of I consider this, we've had a lot of success in a tough time. So. Also want to bring your attention to an audit of Proposition 1D bond funds under the Governor's executive order for bond accountability. This Office of State Audits and Evaluation will be auditing the school facility program. We had our entrance conference earlier this month with them. And the objective of this audit is to ensure the bond expenditures are in compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Also, to note, one of the issues that was raised in our audit subcommittee was one of overlap with local audits that occur. I sent a letter knowing that the Office of State Audits and Evaluations was going to be entering the program, looking at it this year. I sent a letter to them asking that they also include in our scope, the scope of their audit, to look at overlap issues and to examine to see if any of those where overlaps might occur, and they have agreed to include that in the scope of their audit of the program. Also, very notable, you might recognize the folks to my left and my right. We've had some personnel changes at the November board. Ms. Kaplan was appointed as our assistant executive officer. Lisa has a prior tenure in government relations as well as working for members of the legislature, and she's a proud member of the Natoma School Board. which gives us a local perspective on things in our office. And then Ms. Silverman was just appointed as our Deputy Executive Officer. She has stepped up from our Chief Fiscal Officer for the organization. And Lisa brings a very deep background from both Franchise Tax Board and Board of Equalization in 24-plus years, 25 years of audit experience. And she has done outstanding things as our Chief of Fiscal, and I look forward to great things as our Deputy Executive Officer.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations, both of you. Did you need to talk a little bit about what's tab 4, delegation?
Just briefly,
authority?
tab 4 is a delegation of authority that needs to be executed. Again, I'm the person that signs that delegation of authority. There are 2 resolutions before you, one on behalf of Ms. Kaplan and another on behalf of Ms. Silverman. We can have those deemed read into the record, and then I can execute the delegations of authority.
Okay, we'll deem them read into the record.
Okay.
Mr. Harvey, do you have a comment?
If I might, Ward, if you would indulge me just a moment. I come from a local government perspective, as I know many of you had, and we always had, as a courtesy to the public, a public comment portion to our agenda. I've never seen one on our agenda, and I think it's probably, for those items that are not going to be discussed on an agenda, a transparent and nice thing to do to allow the public to comment on whatever they feel is germane to our general business, but not on a particular agenda. And I'd like to propose that we add one today, and we have one going forward. And again, I'd like to have it early in the meeting. I had colleagues when I was on the city council say, oh, let's put it at the back. If we do it at the back, they'll leave before we finish business. So I would like to have it early on, limit the comment to no more than 2 minutes, and let the public have their say. And I'm hoping we can do it ongoing right before the consent calendar, sometime after we've heard from our executive director. Does this make sense? Can we do this ongoing and even have one comment today? Because I do know there is an individual who lives out of the area, would like to comment on high-performance schools, not on our agenda, and I would love to have that opportunity to hear from him.
Is there any objection?
No, I think it's a good idea. I was.
Okay. Well, without objection, we'll move into general public comment. Please limit. Oh, Senator.
It's not real objection, but I think that the idea of transparency is a wonderful thing when it all works. Keeping in mind that we don't want to lose a quorum at these meetings either, and I have no problem with putting it up here at the front, but if we have heavy meetings, particularly if we start shifting around our workload, we may want to consider putting it at the end so people still have an opportunity to say it. Everybody has an opportunity to come to us individually and weigh in. They can send us letters. So it's not like we're squelching public input, but our primary focus here needs to be get the business of this board done. And so, you know, I would hate to, in the eagerness of just jumping on this bandwagon, say yes, and yet we find ourselves down the road because we're all very busy people. Not to say the public isn't. They have access to us all month. It's not just at these meetings. But I would recommend that we figure out where it's going to be, but probably at the end of the meeting is going to allow us to get our business done, and those of us that can stay around can certainly do that.
Can we experiment at least? See how it goes? We may not have a lot of people do it.
I've done it both ways at a local city council, and you know, for the most part, it stayed at the beginning, and that was a healthy thing. So,
well, let's do this for today. Show of hands. Does anyone have public comment that's not related to an item on the agenda today? Well, we have one hand. I suspect it's about high-performing schools. Would you go ahead and like to address us? And then staff, if you can think about in the future, if we can figure out a way to manage this, figure out ahead of time approximately how much time it will take, and we can make a decision based on the members and the schedules if we should do it at the beginning or the end.
Thank you.
I think it's appropriate discussion for rules and operating procedures.
And just 2 minutes.
Oh, wait, this one. The double one.
My name is Bill Orr, and I'm the new Executive Director with the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, and thank you for the brief opportunity to address you today. The main thing I wanted to raise is that while I'm new as the executive director for CHIPS, I'm not new to Proposition 1D and the high performance incentive funding process. I was previously a CHIPS board member when the regulations were written, and what I'm here to talk about today is the fact that the money is not going out to modernization projects. And while most of the new school money is spoken for, there is still about half of the money that was allocated through Proposition 1D that's still available for modernizations. And somewhere between 75 and 80% of the $100 million is still available for the high performance incentive funding. And so what I'd like to request is that the State Allocation Board consider three things. First of all, opening up the regulations to re-examine the incentive funding for modernizations to really incentivize it. Right now, there have been 0 modernization funds allocated for modernization projects. That's after over 2 years. And I think it's time to re-examine that. The second thing is that CHIPS just recently revised our criteria that the high performance incentive funding process was based on, and it should be updated to reflect the new Title 24 Energy Code requirements and the new CHIPS criteria. And the third thing is that to help streamline the process and not duplicate efforts, that third-party reviewed processes like going through a CHIPS certification should be recognized as part of the allocation process. So I would be happy to answer any questions, but I think that in 2010 it's time to open up the regulations again. I've been working with Rob's staff. I've been working with the state architect staff for 6 months since I've been on board as the executive director, and we've not made a lot of progress. We've had some good meetings, but we need to build some momentum and really look at spending the time when we don't actually have money to allocate, fixing sort of this process problem. So I'm here as the executive director and willing to continue to work with both the staff of OPSC and the state architect and stakeholders to fix this and really focus on modernizations.
Thank you.
If I might, as a future agenda item, can we have that kind of discussion, and can we direct, I hope, that this ongoing workshop dialogue take place between OPSC, DSA, other stakeholders? I know Cash has got a working group looking at what could be obstacles to getting these dollars out. We did a good job of taking obstacles away on the seismic. Perhaps it's time to begin to address what we can do to make sure these important dollars go out as well.
And Senator Hancock?
Yeah, I would actually like to see that as an agenda item for our next meeting, because again, time is of the essence, and we want these dollars going out the door. I know, Mr. Orr, you have some suggestions. If Cash does, that would be very useful to us, and it's something really I think that all board members would want to facilitate.
Did you have a comment, Rob?
Just that the area is fairly complex, and Bill can vouch for that. I can assure you, unfortunately, that we will not have a regulation package ready for this board to consider at our next board. This is a complex area. Certainly provide background information, some education in the area, and some discussion about possible barriers. But it took us months to put together the original regulations. It will take some time to get to work this one through.
So can we add it to the agenda next time? So just in terms of having a report on it and figuring out whether or not the board wants to move forward with looking at the regulations, have it as a discussion item as opposed to bringing us a full regulatory packet?
And it could be an implementation committee item as well, because that's where regulations generally are looked at for stakeholders. So,
Senator Hancock.
Yeah, I want to add that I have been concerned since I did push very hard to have the $100 million written into the last bond, have tried, and the board members know we have worked to speed up getting the money out the door. The regulations that were written are very complex, and clearly they have not facilitated spending the money. this is someplace where really I'd like to have some of the practitioners give us the outline of what they think would work for them. And I truly believe that if we could agree on some principles, that regulatory language can be done in one way or another by ledge councils or whatever to speed this up. I mean, we're talking about people unemployed on the street while money, and we need to be ready as soon as we get more bond money for that money to go out. So I don't want to, we passed the bond in 2006, it's 2010, in 2011 it should all be spent.
Okay.
So may I get a clarification what's going to happen on the agenda the next time? We're going to agendize for discussion or agendize if we want to discuss it or not?
I thought we were going to agendize it to have a further discussion and more information, because staff said they couldn't bring us a completed regulatory package, but we could certainly expect a work plan and, you know, how we can get to what the senator raised here.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable expectation. We can have a full, and certainly more than happy to tap Bill and see if we can come up with a full discussion, educate the board on the general background, and get at the key barriers. One of the barriers that's just for general background, one of the key barriers that is actually sitting there for this program, there are some structural issues, but the key one is executive buy-in. And I'm talking about school board level and superintendent level. We need to figure out how to get that kind of buy-in, because frankly, if there are certain districts, Los Angeles Unified is one example, they have executive level buy-in. Their board has sponsored this, and every project they bring forward is they bring under CHIPS. And if we could get that level of buy-in out there, we need to fix some structural issues, but executive level buy-in would get this money out the door, at least this virtual money out the door. But there are other issues that we need to address as well.
Is there time to agendize this for the implementation committee meeting, so a practitioner discussion could occur?
Not for next week's.
It is not?
Committee.
Okay.
Okay. Next is the consent special items. Do we go through those each individually, or do we take it up as a group?
Take him off unless somebody wants to take him off.
Madam,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, as we're trying to figure out, you know, the agenda as we move forward, I would just like to say, ask that at the appropriate, I don't know if it's now, that the SAB meeting frequency, that's item tab 25, be heard earlier in the meeting, to bring that up while there's people here. I think a lot of what we're talking about really is going to be, there's an information item about the frequency of SAB meetings. I'd like that to be heard as early as possible in this meeting.
Is there any objection to taking it out of order?
I would like to, and I didn't notify the board at the outset, although we have individually in briefings, we have more than $100 million in resources available that we could actually make allocations at our next meeting. But there are three policy issues that this board really has to grapple with in order for us as staff to be able to build out the consent agenda for that funding. And those are all under the specials section. I would like to preserve as much time as we need to take care of that essential business. And then
move. That's
Okay.
fine.
Then
Whenever
let's
it's appropriate. I would just like it moved from the back to when it's appropriate.
Okay, let's do that. We'll do it after we go through the special consent items, and we still are missing a member over here on the right anyway, so if we can, maybe we'll all work out. So,
Ms. Bryant, as well with that, can we move the report, the finance report, to prior to taking up those policy items, so that we as a state allocation board know exactly where the funds are before we're making decisions concerning the funds? I noticed that report went to the back of the agenda, And like you said, there's 100 million. It's next meeting that we may have that, but I think it's important that the board know exactly where the funds are from that report before we start taking policy and actual actions on funding items.
Are you referring to our status of funds?
Yes.
Okay. Or the fund release report? Okay. Okay. If we could take I think the issues regarding our consent specials are all resolved. I think that group of items can be dealt with in one action. We can get that off the table, and then we could move to that report.
Okay, so this consent specials, is there anybody want to pull one of them off, or can we take them up as a group? Okay, is there a motion?
I would so move approval of the entire section.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we have a roll call? And just for clarification, which tabs do we, that's tabs. I just want to make sure I have it.
Sorry.
Tabs 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11?
Through 11, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Assemblywoman Brownlee has joined us, just for the record. Thank you.
So we're taking
6 through 11 in one motion.
Yeah, I think that, can we see, though, on 11, there may be people from the Inglewood Unified School District that may be here and want to address.
And those individuals are here, Senator.
So if we would, how would we do this? Should we allow
Why
them
don't
to
we-
address first before we vote on?
We could pull
We
it,
could do-
or we could let the
Yeah,
rest-
because I just want them to, if they've come to.
Well, I should ask
be able to
for
address.
public, is there public comment on items 6 through 11?
Move,
Well, should we?
I move items 6 and 11.
You can move items 6 through 10 and then take up 11.
Right,
All right,
procedurally,
let's
that
do
would
that.
make sense.
Well, what about
Yeah.
items-
Withdraw your
Are we
motion.
agreeing?
No,
Oh,
I
we're
just want-
supporting the district.
And
Okay.
the new motion would be to approve 6 through 10 only.
And I would second that.
Which one, number? Which one?
Item 7. Item-
I'm
Okay, it's
seconding-
been moved and seconded on items 6 through 10. Can you call the roll?
Senator Lowenthal,
Okay. 6 through
Aye.
Senator Hancock,
10. Aye.
Senator Huff, Assemblymember Brownlee,
Aye.
Assemblymember Buchanan, absent. Scott Harvey,
Aye.
Kathleen Moore,
Aye.
Cynthia Bryant,
Aye.
carries.
Okay, item 11, did you want to, staff, since we've taken it separate, you want to present on it real quick?
Right. The item is actually relatively simple, and this is for our overcrowding relief grant program. We had this program was established with a preset number of funding rounds established in regulation. And this Friday is the last one that is set in regulation, and after that, the board doesn't have any any more funding rounds noted. The regulation that you have before you establishes a future funding round for July 30th of this year, and then gives the board authority to set additional funding rounds at its discretion. It's very simple. It just enables that. And if you wanted, the representatives from Inglewood wanted to discuss their issue.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. Joel Kirshenstein, consultant for the Inglewood Unified School District. Gentleman with me is Mr. Rick Ivey, counsel for Inglewood Unified, and Cornell Williams is Director of Facilities for Inglewood Unified in the audience. First, we want to thank staff for their efforts on this particular matter. Inglewood's situation was very unique in that about a year ago, they were in DSA, and the plans came out of DSA. The architect took it over to the modular manufacturer, and there was a sign on the door that the modular manufacturer had filed for bankruptcy. When the bankruptcy process completed itself, it took almost a year to go through the different trustees and the different authorizations which Mr. Ivey can speak to, and then bring on board another modular manufacturer. And when that was filed and the set of plans went into DSA, we were in substantial compliance at that time. Everything was complete, but DSA informed the district that they could not get to it by the deadline. So that's where we are today. We were very concerned that we would lose the opportunity with the ORG grant, and hopefully this sustains our opportunity. We want to be on record that we had it was out of our control when that happened, and we want to be able to come back and get the funding. And again, for the record, the district has already invested almost $2 million in site acquisition and architectural fees for this particular project. So we're in a unique situation, and we do appreciate all the work that has gone into this particular item.
I would like to reiterate the appreciation that Joel expressed to the staff, to Rob, and to this body, and thank you for the opportunity to address you. We do support the regulations that have been proposed. The only thing that we would ask is that perhaps staff be tasked with developing additional options such that there won't be any delay in Inglewood receiving its grant. As we stand today, we expect the DSA will process our plans, and we're hopeful that we can have DSA process it by March or April. They've assured us that they will have it taken care of by April. We would like to avoid, however, any delay in the allocation of the funds. If, as I understand it, being in the second cycle could potentially delay allocation to November, and we would like to at least explore options or explore the funding, that the funding would be allocated at the time that DSA issues its approval.
Did you have a comment on that request?
We can't, well, just general, we can't accept, and the board cannot fund anything that does not have DSA approval. And we have not yet received, and we couldn't receive an application from them until it has been stamped and approved by DSA. So until we receive that and then are able to process it, we won't know what the funding should look like.
Okay.
What we've set up in regulation is a new funding round that should accommodate the needs of the district.
Mr. Harvey?
If I might, this may be a germane and appropriate time to comment about something that Senator Hancock said and what you're alluding to, and I will tell you that we have put a task force together, and this task force is charged with ensuring that the bin time, that is the time that these applications stay at DSA, will be no longer than 30 days. We've found ways of redirecting staff. We've found ways of working through barriers, and we are making a commitment publicly that the bin time will shrink to 30 days. So the question you confronted before, the issue you confronted before, I hope will be taken care of with this promise, and all other DSA activities will be similarly handled. We've also recognized the need to create jobs, and any application that is only locally funded doesn't require the need to go to us at OPSC for state dollars, since we're not generating any state dollars currently. Those are prioritized. So it's locally funded projects that are shovel-ready go to the top of the stack, but no one will stay longer than 30 days. Now, Rob, I assume if you get this stamped from DSA, we have a process that moves it quickly through, and with the approval of this agenda item, they will at least have the facility to get their funding. But there are no barriers at our end, is there?
No, there aren't. No, there aren't. Not once this regulation is put in place.
Assemblymember Brownlee?
One of the, just for a point of clarification, member, we came out of DSA with a set of plans with very little bit of markups left. And again, when we went back to the manufacturer, they weren't there. So one of the issues was should we can move forward with this item, or should we go forward with an appeal? And that's something we would just like to take some time to discuss with staff, because it's critical that we preserve the integrity of the funding, considering the district's investment of their local tax dollar in this particular project site. So whether it's what we need is some time, now that we see this regulation, to work out what the best course of action would be, and we would work closely with staff on whatever it would be.
Member Brownlee?
Yeah, I just, I think that, I think that we're not able to really discuss this in full because it's not an item that's been agendized. But I do think that there's a situation, this is extenuating circumstances for Inglewood, and I think by virtue of this item, establishing a 6th round of funding with a deadline is one option in terms of solving the problem. But what I would like to ask staff is if we could, perhaps they could look at the situation and come back to us maybe at the next meeting with a set of various options that the board could deliberate on to, help Inglewood to ensure them that their project's going to move forward on a timely basis. And I think probably the other concern is making sure that there's money at the end of the rainbow here. And so by expediting it in a deliberate and as quickly as we possibly can, we'll, obviously ensure that. So that's what I would ask, is if we could come back with some options that we can deliberate on to help Inglewood move forward, because I do believe that they are, they had some extenuating circumstances with their contractor and the bankruptcy, et cetera. So.
Thank you.
Did someone over there have a comment? Okay.
Move the recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Is there a motion on item 11?
Item 11. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. There's no objections. We can substitute the last roll call. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that motion include that we'll come back with a report for other options on this particular issue?
Yes, that's what I was asking for, whether I was clear or not.
That's how I take it.
Yeah.
All right,
okay.
great, thank you.
We can certainly provide that, whether it was in the motion or not, so. Whether it was in the motion or not, so.
Okay, item 12.
At this point, to accommodate Ms. Moore's request, we can skip to the status of funds and lay out where the money is and isn't, and then take up these items.
So we'll skip to item 25?
22.
22.
And Lisa Silverman will address this.
Good afternoon. What I want to present to you is our financial report, basically giving you a check and balances of the authorization of the bond funds and where we stand today and where we stand with the unfunded approvals. So obviously there's a few new members here, and we wanted to highlight in Proposition 1D, which is the first. Yeah, it's the top of your page if you turn the book sideways. Proposition 1D. We originally received $7.3 billion in bond allocation for the program. And to date, we have provided almost $967 million in unfunded approval. But what we're presenting today at this board is $12.3 million that represents 9 projects. We also have a seismic item that's on the agenda, a .4, which is a Piedmont project that Ms. Hancock's district. And we also wanted to highlight we are presenting $123 million in modernization unfunded approvals. That represents 80 projects. We are also providing allocation for overcrowding relief of $0.8 million, and losing my track. Excuse me, that's high performance, and 73.7 in overcrowding relief. That represents 15 projects. So in Proposition 1D alone, we're providing $210 million of unfunded approvals. And if you go to the middle category, which is Proposition 55, we originally received $10 billion in authorization. And what we're presenting today is one project in new construction that represents $0.3 million. and that's the activity that we have solely for Proposition 55. In Proposition 47, we initially received $11.4 billion in authorization, and what we're presenting at this board is $173 million of unfunded approvals in new construction. That represents 36 projects. And so in total, what we're presenting, and you'll see at the bottom of the sheet there, we're presenting $383 million of unfunded approvals at this board, which brings our accumulation of unfunded approvals in a program of $1.93 million. And if you turn to the next page, we wanted to draw your attention to the emergency repair program. There's a middle chart there. And what we're presenting today is $37.2 million in unfunded approvals, which represents 52 applications. But in the prior month's activities, obviously we have no funds in the program currently, and so we had $15.2 million unfunded approvals that was presented as an accumulation at the last board. And so that's the presentation of the financial statements.
Are there any questions for Ms. Silverman? Mr. Harvey?
As you know, you were kind enough to agree that at some future board meeting you were going to talk about recognizing bond covenants and what have you, whether there was an ability to take the energy set-asides in 55 and 47 and somehow work them with the high-performance bonds and therefore get more bang for the buck in this area of energy efficiency. Is it possible that that discussion can be part of what we're doing at next month?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, did you have a question?
And then if I may, can you just talk about the implications of cash flow that not right now, but as you talked about of the items that we may consider through the consent, through the special consents, how that impacts it?
Oh, on the, you're talking about items, the beginning of the special consents.
Right, where you
Okay,
indicated there's $100 million that could actually be apportioned at some point.
Right.
Can you talk about that contextually within this, as you present those within this report? Or how it affects this report? Thank you.
Okay. It doesn't so much,
Okay,
I mean, this is
talk
just a
about it.
reflection of the actions the board takes. It doesn't really have much impact on this other than as a reporting. But if the board is ready, we can start picking up those special items.
Okay, item 12.
Yes, item 12. There are 3 policy issues that the board needs to address so that we can we know how far the money will go and to whom it will go and so I will. The first item before you is under tab 12 and is for Tokay High School in Lodi. This is a facility hardship project, $7.7 million. This project received an unfunded approval in May. We believe there is regulatory authority if one of the key agencies involved in this process unnecessarily delays a project. There's the ability to move the date with the board's approval, the authority to move the date of the project up. In this case, the Office of Public School Construction believes that we did not do as diligent a job on this project as we should have, and it was therefore unnecessarily delayed. And our recommendation in this item is that we move it forward and give it an earlier date in line. The district spent these funds. This is a reimbursement to the district of the state funds in an amount of about $7.7 million.
That we approve that date change of March 25th, 2009.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any objection? Oh,
No objection. I have a question based on how you began this presentation and marrying it up with what Ms. Moore had to say about the $100 million. If we take action on this, which I support, for about $7 million, does that leave us 93 for the rest of the items? Are we connecting the $100 million to what we act on these special consents?
This pushes this project earlier and means that it will receive funding within the $100 million. It's not taking. I guess you could characterize it taking. It's certainly moving it up in the priority. It will get funded. So, And by necessity, some other project somewhere at the end
Pushed back further.
is pushed back further.
Okay, thank you.
That's an effect of that as these other items.
Ms. Moore?
Okay, so just so I understand, are you saying that, my understanding is we have allocated actual funds to projects that were approved as of December 17th, 2008, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That was our unfunded list that is now covered by the bonds that were issued both throughout last year and finally in the fall. So we've covered all those projects, correct?
That's correct.
Where does the $100 million that you are referring to come from now? Does that mean that how do we have $100 million actual dollars now?
Well, I'll describe that for you. Stop me if I could. Anyway, I won't go too technically on it. Bond sales for this program have gotten a lot more complex since the freeze hit. Once upon a time, we used to get loans directly out of the Pool Money Investment Board, and the Treasurer's Office would determine times they would go to market and then replenish the Pool Money Investment Board, basically repaying loans on our behalf. In going to the Pool Money Investment Board, there was a lot of flexibility, and we could ask for funds as we needed them, and they would sort out all of the issues, address all the issues on the back end associated with the various pots of funds, the sources of the money, the types of bonds that can be sold. For example, our charter projects, because they have a loan component, cannot be tax-exempt bonds. They are actually taxable bonds. Same thing with our career tech program. Since there are loans issued, they can only be issued as taxable bonds. And in the October bond sale, we asked for funds to be sold in certain configurations to cover all the outstanding projects we had. We needed funds. We needed bonds sold out of Prop 1D, 47 and 55, and taxable and non-taxable, and another Build America bonds, which
and
have
this was to cover through December 17th.
That was to cover through the December 17th. There was the bonds were not sold in the precise configurations that we asked for, and there was 20 charter schools wound up. The money that we had hoped to have for charter schools actually got held up because the funds weren't sold properly. But we had an extra 20. The top line figure was the right figure, but the configuration of the bonds was off. We were short for charter, and we had $25 million that we didn't have that wasn't obligated by any apportionments. Okay, there were later financings in November and twice in November that gave us some additional money, took care of the charter problem for us as well. And there was a commercial paper sale. These are small financings the state did that have given us additional money.
So is it correct to categorize our decision-making on the next three items that if we approve them, those items would go ahead of, say, the December 18th project?
No. Their dates are by the board that they were apportioned at. So
I'm sorry. Okay, so they would be January 25th, 2009.
We didn't
like
start.
that?
Well, we technically didn't start making apportionments till March. We've moved the Tokay project to the March board.
So we have $100 million to begin apportioning to projects that we took care of the December list. Now we're moving on to 2009 apportionments.
That's correct.
Actual apportionments.
Yeah.
And our actions today can impact that apportionment list. Is that
Yes.
correct characterization?
Yes. And we need these decisions made because I can tell you we've tried to go through all the permutations on this. There are an endless number based on the bond source and the program type and the type of funds that we have available, taxable, non-taxable, and Build America. It changes the outcome quite a bit. And so
does it change the outcome of funding by date order, which was what the board approved?
No matter what we do, because of the pots of funds, there will be projects of one type that will get funded that may have a later date than a project of another type. And it's completely unavoidable. Either we sit on cash until...
I think it would be important that we have a public agenda item where people understand how that works, because I can see where someone would say, how come Joe X got funded before me and I know that my date is before theirs, without a public disclosure that that happened because of how the bond sales happened or whatever the reasoning is. I think it's very important as we move forward as a board, and we have a lot of people that sit on lists, and every one of them believes their project is very important and they want to get it funded, and they believe they're sitting in a funding order, that if we are not funding within that order, that we talk about that and publicly disclose it.
There's no issue with public disclosure. Once we've made these policy calls, we will be able to publish a list. More than happy to discuss with anybody what the consequences of that are as far as date order goes. But fundamentally, it has to do with, you know, the amounts of money that we have in various pots, and this isn't an issue when you have, you know, when money is flowing. It becomes a very big issue now. But our alternative, frankly, is to sit on, if you don't expend all the funds within a given pool of funds for projects that may come a little bit later than something in another pot, you're going to just be sitting on cash that you could otherwise get out to the street and get a project going.
Assemblymember Brown.
I must say that I'm a little confused. Okay. I do understand what you're saying is that there are several pots of money. There's the stimulus money, there's taxable, non-taxable, and then there's this group of projects that we're going to approve or not approve. And it sounds to me as though we actually need to know from what funding source these projects are coming from so that we can discern. I mean, I presume that everything that's before us today is eligible for a certain pot of money, and we're not going to deplete any of those pots, right? Mm-hmm. Is that true, or?
The projects that we would be moving here, based on the changes that we're proposing here, these projects will get funded.
Okay. But some projects are going to get funded earlier than others, depending on what pot of money they're funded from.
Yeah. We're wandering into a very, very complicated area that's probably easier to diagram for you. But there are, like I said, for example, just use, for example, the $25 million that we had for charters that are taxable bonds. Those we've set aside. Same thing, same issue with Career Tech. Those had to be sold out of non-Build America taxable bonds. They can only they could be used for other projects, but those projects can't access any other bit of funds. Then there are Build America bonds that are in each of the categories: Proposition 1D, Prop 47, Prop 55, that can be used for most of our program.
And we can put that money in any pot we want to?
No.
It has to be distributed in a certain way.
The money was sold in a certain configuration, and it is locked down in that configuration.
But what will happen, and I think, again, if I were a district, I'm locked on what's my date, and are the funds flowing, and when am I getting my piece? And if they see somebody that is below them in a date order get funded, it looks funny. And so I think we have to publicly go through how that's operating, because we approved as a board to fund in date order.
Assemblymember Buchanan.
It seems to me that the issue that's immediately before us is relatively simple. You have a district that has gone through the process as prescribed, and because of our own failure to act in a timely manner. They're asking us to correct that error and change the date of the application. So it really, to me, that seems like a reasonable request, and it's a district that is eligible and that would have been funded if we hadn't made those errors. So what they're really asking us to do is correct that.
Yeah. Senator Hancock?
I agree with that. I have to say, if you read the item, it appears that OPSC made an error. We are rectifying the error. It seemed to me the less we said about it and moved on, the better. But if we need to have public disclosure to be transparent, I suppose we could say OPSC error next to it as a reason why. Is that?
I'll just clarify. I'm not talking about this item specifically. I'm talking about globally. We are now beginning to fund off of the post-December 17th freeze. And globally, I think that districts will want to know where they stand on the list and are they getting funded as the funds flow. We have $100 million that's flowing. If we decide as a board this should be the first priority of that of that funding, I think that's what this item is saying. But ongoing, we need to know who on the list is receiving funding and in what order.
And what that will be laid out completely for the board. If you take these decisions, that money, all of that falls out from those decisions. We'll be able to lay out where the money is, who gets it, in what order. That's easy. Okay, once the decisions are made. It is impossible. We were trying to go through the permutations on this. It is impossible to come to every possible combination here. And so ask the board to make these decisions, and then it will be easy to disclose that once those are made.
Move the question.
I think we have public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Duffy for the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. Ms. Moore has a point. We in this time of no funding have discussed the issue of line jumping and date order. This is the first that we've understood that there was anything having to do with dates and the various bonds that were sold. Rob, you and I had a conversation last summer about facility hardship projects, and you told me that those go to the top of the list, no matter what the date order it is.
That's not accurate. They are the top of the list on a given date.
On a given date, yes. So for that month, they would get, if there's limited amount of funding, they would receive funding when others may not. And that was the only difference that we'd understood to the issue of going out of date order. But we would like very much to know, Rob, what this construct is that you were describing, so that we can make sure districts are aware of it.
Can I just ask a quick question? I just wanted to clarify this question of having all these different types of fund sources and types of bonds that have been sold. That's not a decision that was made by this board, right? And it was not a decision made by the Office of School Construction either, right? It's just something that it was decided by the treasurer in conjunction with what the market conditions are.
That's correct.
So what we're stuck with is implementing in that scenario. And so we're in the middle of uncharted.
Taking the funds available and trying to get them out as
quickly as possible.
I think the only thing, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. I think what Mr. Duffy is saying is we've got a group of districts who are applying for funds. They don't know that there's different buckets of funds. They're applying for funds, and after they go through that process and they're awarded or not awarded projects, they're going to find out that my project was approved on X date, and somebody else got approval, 3 months later, but yet got moved up, the ladder for some reason. And I think we're just struggling with making sure that districts understand that we don't have control over that and that these dates will be variable because of it. And I think they're accustomed to saying first in line, first approval, et cetera. So I think that's the primary issue.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like, I mean, I'm obviously relatively new to this. It sounds to me like we're really in uncharted territory. The board decided to make decisions even though there wasn't funding available. And we just have to make sure that the expectations of the stakeholders, that they understand. And I think that's your point, that we just want to have some sort of a system. And you're saying that we have to make these 3 decisions so you can do all the rest of the puzzle pieces and provide that information. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. That's correct. Madam Chair, we support OPSC in trying to make sure that dollars get on the street if they have real dollars. It's just we want to make sure our districts understand what that construct is.
What the rules are.
Yes.
What is the impact? And I think it sounds like we don't know for absolute sure how the dominoes below this Tokay High decision, how the rest of if it affects other people, you have the variables are immense, it sounds like, I'm understanding.
The irony here is that they're not line jumping when we correct the date to what it should have been. We're putting them where they would normally have fallen. So they're not really bumping anybody. They're going right where they should be. So in a sense, this has been a healthy discussion, and maybe, but it's not necessary. Maybe what we need is to Rob to say, if you take this action, you are affecting dollars that are currently available, just so we know that it means this project is going to be funded. Maybe that is the public notice that people need. Because I think there's so many permeations of what may happen. I don't know how you even do it in a graft, but
we struggled with it, frankly, and it was I long ago gave up trying to anticipate where this board is going to go on any one topic. So
we're going to move this one right now. I move the question.
Well, it's been moved and seconded on item 12. Is there any objection to substituting our previous roll call? Okay, then let's move to item 13, which is going to still raise the same issues. I think
definitely the same general issues. What we have is a group of projects of approximately $9.7 million. The majority of these are actually projects that were given a real apportionment in December of 2008. They were the first round of funding under the Overcrowding Relief Grant Program. But that program is not an automated program, and some of the calculations associated, we miscalculated some of the funding. These projects were shorted their money. We caught up with that and corrected the error in May of this year and gave them an unfunded approval. We didn't have the authority to make an apportionment for them. But they have a real apportionment and real cash backing part of their project, but they do not have all of the resources. What we're suggesting is that we move this date forward as well so that they also get funding, so they have so that they're able to get all of the funding for their project, so that we can then keep them to the timelines and get the money out and get these projects done. Absent that, they're going to be hanging out with half an apple for an extended period of time.
Are there any questions or comments?
Move the item.
Second. Any public comment on this one? Okay. Moved and seconded. Any objection to substituting our last roll call?
Nope.
Right. Item 14.
Okay. Item 14 is an annual grant adjustment that is made. The board is required in January of each year to adjust the grants according to a Class B construction cost index. This board has, since going back to 98, has used a Marshall and Swift construction index. Since 2005, it has used, with one exception, an 8 California cities index to adjust those grants. And these, there's a ripple. This adjustment has gone up in all prior years, sometimes fairly substantially, sometimes not so substantially. And this year, based on, well, frankly, the depression that's going on in the building industry, this index that reflects labor and materials is negative for the first time. And staff is recommending that we adopt the 8 California cities index that is minus 6.74.
I think there's probably public comment on this item. That's my guess. Want to go ahead? Unless the members want to ask questions first. You want to hear public comment first? Yeah, go ahead then.
Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Brown, and I am the outgoing Assistant Superintendent for Facilities Development with the San Ramon Valley Unified School District here in the East Bay, and I am the incoming Director of Facilities Program Management for the Los Angeles Unified School District.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm wearing two hats today, and maybe even a third, representing Chappelle Homes, because this CCI adjustment that's before you today affects all three of those districts, all three of those entities. My districts have reviewed the construction cost index proposal for this upcoming meeting, and we are concerned with the implication will be on projects currently on the unfunded list. We do not believe the OPSC or the SAB should apply the negative CCI adjustment to projects on the unfunded list when the state has bond funds to apportion. Until today, the practice has always been to apply the current CCI at the time of apportionment. And this made sense because the state had exhausted all bond authority and did not have funds to allocate for the projects in the year that they were funded. The last time an unfunded list was created was in 2006. But today the situation is much different, yet it is very significant. Today the SAB is operating under the Department of Finance budget letter 08-33, which directs state agencies, including the State Allocation Board, to cease apportioning bond funds. This is not a case of when bond authority has been exhausted. This is the case of a state agency making a decision to freeze apportionments to protect the state's general fund. School districts have done everything they could to complete the funding process and otherwise would have received an apportionment if not for the budget letter. And we are not blind to this economic reality. There is no cash, but we also should not be harmed by the state's inability to issue bonds, which we already are because we're building projects and we're floating the money, the state share. And then again, make us subject to the CCI adjustment 1 year after the fact. And let's assume we don't sell bonds for a whole year. We would be subject to the CCI adjustment in 2011. For my current district, San Ramon Valley Unified, that affects the only state-approved seismic project. We have the only state-approved project. It's a gym that we're replacing. It's on the unfunded list. It's under construction, and that would have a 7%, or that 6.74% hit to that project. California High School modernization is going on in that school district, and that would also take a 6.7% hit. More importantly, in the San Ramon Valley, we have a unique joint venture agreement with developers in that valley who build our schools and then get reimbursement from the state. The last school built by Chappelle Homes was a bid in 2008, was occupied in September of 2009, and it sits on that unfunded list for $22 million. That project would take a 6.7% hit and maybe even another hit in 2011 if the state doesn't sell bond funds. And that just doesn't make sense. For my future employer, Los Angeles Unified, it's the same thing, only to a greater extent. They have many, many more projects on the unfunded list, and they would take an unnecessary hit for projects that are under construction or are already built. And it just isn't fair because the state has the bond authority. I need to cite one other thing for you. Regulation section 1859.95 provides for exemptions to the application process when the state agency impedes a district's ability to file a funding application and provides that the school district receive the appropriate date in line. Oh my God, just like the last items. And so it's very interesting how this works. And so the intent of that regulation is to hold harmless a school district if a state agency in any way delays the normal flow of the process that resulted in a disadvantage to a school district. And we think this is one such disadvantage, that it's nothing that the school district has done, and we should not be subject to the 6.7% hit. The intent of highlighting this section is to show that provisions have been made in the regulations that contemplate when a state agency might have slowed or impeded the process. And we think that's the case in this case. For all those school districts who have done everything correctly, and we sit there fronting the state's share of the money because you don't have the cash, we're willing to do that. But don't make us take a 6.7% hit on projects that have already been bid, are already awarded, or maybe we're already in them. Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, go ahead, Assemblymember Buchanan.
Well, I actually wish we would have taken the approval of the new grant amounts prior to the application, but and I will do true confessions here. I was board member in Santa Maria Valley Unified School District for 18 years, but during that time we went through about $1 billion in construction projects, so I'm very familiar with the state's process and all that we go through. But I do think there's an inherent unfairness, not just for Santa Maria Valley or LA Unified, but if a school district receives approval from the state, an approval to fund X dollars for a project, and goes on and does all of its planning based on those dollars, then, after the fact, because the state is borrowing from the pooled money to fund its general fund, receives less money, I think it's just inherently unfair. So, irrespective of what we think should be done with the grant amounts, I'm assuming that if we made this effective for projects we decide to fund after January 1, then those versus a portion, then those districts, would know what the grant amount is at the time they're actually going out to bid and making the construction decisions. Is that?
I was trying to play with the wording in option 1 because we do agree the CCI should be applied for projects either with an unfunded approval after January 1, but it shouldn't apply to any projects with unfunded approvals prior to January 1, and that's the key here.
If the CCI went up, would you want to just stay where you are then?
If the CCI went up, we would take that money, and I'll tell you why. In the past, when the CCI went up and we had a project that was either occupied or was under construction, we still weren't at 50-50. We were never at 50-50, and I think an upcoming item will prove that to you, and that's why we have the AB 127 6% adjustment. We were never there. In LA Unified, all their last projects, they were funding 70%. I think the statistics today is that new construction's funding 65%. So would we take the CCI? Absolutely. Are we taking more than our 50% share? Never.
Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm an architect, so I have pictures, because that's how we roll. My name is Laura Noss, and I'm a principal at Lionakis Architects. We're a 230-person firm, 5 offices here in California, with about 30 to 40% of our business in school construction. What I've put in front of you is a case study.
I think you need to talk into the skinny mic.
Into the skinny mic? Mm-hmm. Better?
Yeah.
What I've put in front of you is a case study of the old program elementary school compared to the current grant-funded elementary school, and I have some footnotes in there. And the reason I've done that is because we feel like we're constantly running to keep up and get to the place of parity with the old lease purchase program. I titled this Questioning the Assumptions for a reason, because I think Margie talked specifically. Okay, thank you. Margie talked to you a little bit about why the CCI is so important to districts on the unfunded list. I think it's also important to all projects, and the reason is that our assumptions keep changing, but we keep using the old model on which to add the adjustments. And so in this particular example, when I'm talking about soft costs and questioning the assumptions, we've continued over the years to add bureaucracy to our schools. And that's Department of Toxic Substance Control, Access Compliance, and CDE have fees that they didn't back in the day. California Geologic Survey, CEQA, SWIPPES, all of these things keep getting added into a school construction project with very little recognition in the funding bumps that we're taking. Even the Berkeley study found that our bureaucracy is holding us back in terms of dollars per student spent on construction. Even technology costs, furniture, and equipment, we're not keeping up with that. Then the second assumption I would question is trying to compare ourselves to a lease purchase program that on an elementary school had 59 square feet per children. The Department of Ed's new study on complete schools showed us that the average complete school has 74 square feet per child at the elementary level. Why is that? Because of class size reduction in part, because of specialists we have in our schools that are required. The Civic Center Act and community access to facilities has us being asked and mandated to provide additional facilities, and certainly the issue of core facilities. In my rough little guideline here, I use $225 a square foot. You're going to ask me, could I bid this project today and have it come in the grants, given the world that we're in today? And the answer is probably, if I had enough bidders here. But would it be answering all the problems? And the problems come in a lot of different ways. And one of them, I think, is that we're getting to that place on the backs of overhead and profit for contractors that are going to go under, carrying that overhead and profit. Right now in California, all the recent data shows that we are seeing about a 4% bump in the labor rates for a school, about a 1.6% drop in material costs for a net of 3%, somewhere in there, and that we're finding the 10 to 15% reductions in costs all coming out of contractor overhead and profit to keep their machines running and their people working. What does that mean for us in 2010 or 2011? Most of them won't be around, and especially subcontractors, because you can't continue to run with no overhead and profit and still get to a place of building your business. So the analysis we did in terms of site costs and construction costs might be valid in today's market, but the reality of the situation is we're going to see those people go under if they continue to bid projects at the rates that we're seeing right now. So just to get to the last point, I think as we look forward, maybe not on this issue of grant increases, maybe not on the CCI, but maybe as we look forward to the program, are we questioning the right things? Are we asking ourselves the right questions? Is parity with the lease purchase really what we want? Are we acknowledging the soft costs that we as a state keep layering on our school construction? And finally, in sort of a architectural big picture way, are we really building what the schools that we want to build? Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Ted Rossi, Assistant Superintendent of Facilities, Corona Norco Unified School District. Not going to reiterate some of the points of the previous speakers, but just to reinforce a few points. One being, obviously, as all school districts are going to be concerned with any reduction in the grant amounts, we think it's at a minimum that this should not apply to any projects that have already been approved but are unfunded. I mean, that seems to be a minimum. I would also offer and request that you also consider not applying it to projects which have already been bid. We have a project, an elementary school that we are completely reconstructing, which has been going through the state approval process, going through DTSC, currently at CDE, will eventually get to OPSC. And all the agencies find no fault in it. It's just the process of going through OPSC. This project was built 18 months ago, will not be occupiable until the end of the calendar year. But again, because of the DTSC process, and they did everything they could to help us through it, we lost about a year of construction time just in having to remediate some dirt with an unacceptable level of termiticide in it. And it's an existing school site that's been used for 60 years. But to rebuild the school, we had to find other time. So for us, we had bids a year and a half ago that now, based on the expected state reimbursement, will be reduced because of, through no fault of anyone, it's just the process, and we support the process because it does provide the safest sites for our students. So beyond just those which are unfunded, approved but unfunded, I would request you consider all those that have already been bid, because that is another major item. It's one thing to know going in that your reduction or your apportionment's been reduced, but to have a project because of the natural process be reduced. And then I would reiterate what Laura just said about the types of projects. I think one of this reflects is the lack of projects that have been examined over the last year. And in our area, we have 5 projects ongoing, and we also have the same experience where contractors are telling us that the reason the bids are so good, A, because they're bidding against people who don't normally bid school projects. They're bidding against residential construction builders and all types of other contractors. And as she indicated, they're bidding against people who are just trying to keep the doors open. So when you're taking a loss or a zero overhead and profit, it really does reflect the prices and reduce them unfavorably, and which would not occur normally. So that is really something that I just wanted to reiterate that she said. I'm not sure this really reflects what's currently happening in the market. I don't know that my prices are getting any smaller on labor, materials, furniture, and equipment. It's really just the overhead and profit of the contractors. So thank you.
Next.
Christina Becker, Director of Santee Schools Maintenance, Operations, Facilities, and it's a very small district with only 9 schools. I have 6,000 students. It was very important when my local board passed a bond of only $60 million to do their schools. So we moved forward. Even though it was said, don't go forward, they made a promise to my community. We moved forward. I have 6 projects on today's allocation, and I have $33 million already unfunded that I move forward with. So we're just hoping to be reimbursed. To find out that that reimbursement is going to go down because of an economy blip this year isn't fair. I see that, yes, it comes down 6 to 7%, but when you look at how that attributes to all the supplemental grants for energy and access, it's probably a 12 to 15% hit in my grant amount and allocation. And so it's just more on to what I can't do in the future. And because of that, $25 Southwestern Fair, I'm here to tell you that. And I always like to come up and say, hi, I'm here to talk about one of those little districts you never get to see. Thank you for your time.
The skinny mic, Madam Chair. Tom Duffy again for cash. You have 3 items that are on your agenda that are really interrelated. The one is the OPSC study of grants. The other is the CCI that you have before you right now. And the third is the developer fee, level 1 developer fee item. What has been requested by the prior speakers of not affecting the unfunded approvals with a compromise of a negative CCI, I think is reasonable. The fact that $2 billion worth of schools were not placed under contracts in 2009 are reflective of the number that you have in what is proposed by OPSC. So we would ask that you leave the projects from 2009 alone and have them at the very least not be affected by a negative CCI should you choose to do that. I would also request, looking ahead to the item of the OPSC study, that we think that study, by our analysis and clarifying an error that's in it, that it identifies that the overall projects that are in the study are really funded at about 37.5%, so certainly way down from that 50%, which would support a 6% increase. So one option for you would be to provide an increase for the projects that were approved as unfunded in 2009, which was an option the board left open for itself last year when it continued to wait to really bring this action forward. And by the way, that's to reflect cost from 2008. So you have the 2009 adjustment of the 6% that you could make. If you were to apply the negative CCI that's there, then it would leave about a 0.7% negative. What Laura Now's told you was that there's an increase and we've seen this, in costs of labor and a slight decrease in the cost of hard construction materials. One thing that she mentioned that really I have to underscore for you, and Mr. Harvey, you were talking about DSA and processing today. DSA was at a cash meeting this morning and talked about increases in fees for DSA. They're not reflected in the CCI. Those come out of the pupil grants as soft costs, planning costs. So there's what Laura stated for you was that the Berkeley study, and Jeff Vincent's in the audience here who did the study, identified that California regulates construction of public schools more than anyone else, building the smallest schools at the largest price. So with all that, I would ask you to really take these three items into consideration and recognize, and this will be my final comment on this, recognize that we have been in an anomaly, and that anomaly is sharing with us a negative CCI that people in the field, such as the ones that just spoke to you, don't believe is real because of what contractors are doing. Ever since last year, when the PMIB was meeting, they heard from contractors, Mr. Sheehy was here, they heard from contractors who were basically saying what we're doing is we're just keeping our doors open, keeping people working, not taking a profit, and in fact taking losses. So when the economy goes up, we would not want to have an entire year affected by this negative CCI because you don't get to visit it under statute until next January, unless you put it off. Thank you very much. I appreciate your patience.
Any other comment?
Good afternoon. My name is Janet Dixon. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for Riverside Unified School District. And just to piggyback on some of the comments that were made there earlier by some of my colleagues, we would request that projects that have already been submitted to OPSC be exempted from the negative adjustment in the grant amount. We had a project approved today, one of the ORG projects. We're very excited about it. We actually started construction on that project in December. But we submitted that application last July. And due to the slowdown in OPSC, due to furlough days and other factors, it is taking an extraordinary amount of time to get projects through OPSC and even get them to the board to get on an unfunded list. So where we would normally have already been on the unfunded list, due to that slowdown, it's taking longer. And we proceeded in good faith, not realizing that we'd be hit on the backside with this reduction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? Any questions or comments from the board? Senator Lowenthal?
Yeah, I am sensitive to that, what I'm hearing, the consensus, the recommendation that for 2009 unfunded approvals that we not apply this to, but for those that are going to be moving forward in 2010, that whatever we decide to, for the new CCI decrease, that whether we do the 674 or the 6 point, I think it's 22, whatever we choose, those are the projects that it applies to, but we not apply it to those projects that have already been approved but just got not funded. That's a substitute motion.
In the staff memo, it seems to imply that it's after 2010.
If we make an apportionment in 2010, what we do is we reset all, based on the CCI, we reset all the grant amounts. When we go to an apportionment, and this is longstanding, this is practice that goes back 10 years, and there have been a couple of times when there have been unfunded approvals made in the program. They enjoy, in good times, an increase in the construction cost index. This is a unique situation. It's the first time it's ever declined. But they are adjusted, our grants are adjusted, those are programmed. We would then bring those forward. I don't know how we would execute this bifurcation.
I was confusing the unfunded approval with the apportionment, so I apologize.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this: if the board made a decision at some point to go ahead and do these unfunded approvals, as an alternative, what could have happened is the board could have decided to just hold off making any approvals until bonds were able to be sold again and the market conditions approved.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, no one would know that they were getting cut, so to speak, because there would not have been any of these unfunded approvals made.
Mm-hmm.
And now what we're talking about is I think we're sort of faced with looking at specific projects when we're really talking about a policy in state law that these amounts get reduced or increased. Usually they get increased. We're in a reduction year. So there's, I'm sympathetic to everything that the commentators said, and they have specific schools and specific projects, but if we had never done unfunded approvals, they would not really know that they were affected. They would have a sense that they were going to be coming into the queue, but they wouldn't be in it yet. Do I have it wrong?
Yeah, I think you do, and this is why. Every school district knows what your grant funds are for elementary, middle, and high school. And once they have approvals, they move forward and plan those projects and bid those projects and do their facilities budget based on what they anticipate getting from the state in those grant funds. So if you waited to make the change at the time of apportionment, they're going to know that they were anticipating one amount and were getting 6 or 6.7% less. And so, when you have school districts that are going out, first of all, that have taken over 20% cuts to their general fund in the last 2 years, that are going out and bidding projects waiting for the state's apportionment because we can't sell bonds or we're using that bond money to balance the general fund, they are making those assumptions. So if they don't get that money, they have to make it up somewhere else. If they can make it up within their own facilities program, great. If not, they have to dip into the general fund. So we're affecting their financial planning, in a much bigger way than just how much we write the check. The same is true if you have a developer-built school. Those developers are making their plans and planning their budgets and how they're going to build out and everything based on what the costs are. And we're, in some respects, changing the rules mid-game, not to any fault on the part of the districts or the developer, but because of our own financial problems here at the state. And I think it's actually, I understand that. I think what will happen is you'll have to have two rates in place so that schools who had unfunded approvals prior to January 1 will receive facility grant funding at one rate, and schools who have unfunded approvals January 1 or after will receive funding at the new rate. But it seems to me that from my point of view, that's the way we should be going.
Mr. Harvey?
How much of this is really a paper adjustment, because we really are not going to be selling bonds for who knows how long, in the sense that we take action to stay the course, increase it or decrease it, but how does that really affect when a district gets the money if we're not going to do it 2 years from now, and next year we're going to be faced with adjusting it up or down, and the year after that we're faced with adjusting it up or down, and unless you keep putting these well, it's going to be 09 for these unfunded, and I mean, ugh.
We're keeping track of it on paper, but they're real dollars that districts use to plan their facilities. And it makes a big difference to the district when they're trying to decide if they can add classrooms at a school that's overcrowded or modernize a school or make other decisions as to what, this is how much we have in the bond, this is what our bid amount is, our contingency, this is how much we expect to get from the state. And they're making forward planning decisions based on that. And many of those districts have been making decisions for a year or so now. We had one person testify that he would like to see it extended to projects that have been bid but don't have approvals yet. So that's a district that's really sort of betting out there, assuming that the state's going to have money.
As to bids, I'm not a contractor, but every time I've remodeled a home, the bid amount was for a set period of time. It didn't go on for 18 months
Right,
or
but
24 months.
this is again where they're sort of loaning the project money from future projects, assuming that they are going to get approval and apportionment. So, I mean, I would move that we accept staff's recommendation for option 1, but we change the wording to adjust the grant for state SFP projects for unfunded approvals on or after January 1, 2010, using the 8 California Cities Index.
Is there any comments, questions from the other side? Senator Huff.
I think we need a second on that, and then I do have a question.
I think we agree. I think that's what I said.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I think we have a second.
Okay. Yeah, for just a question of Mr. Cook, because I thought I heard him say he didn't know how he's going to implement such a bifurcated thing. I agree with what you're saying. I just want to make sure technically we have the ability to do that, or if not, maybe we put this off to a time we can figure out how to do it.
We would, normally when these adjustments are made, we plug these numbers into our system, okay? And then they start, and they're automatic calculations that start coming out as we process projects. In this bifurcation here, that means we're going to have to do a manual process on one side or the other, which means that we're going to take, we are literally, we're going to run a tape on projects rather than our automated systems. We'll have to choose one over the other.
Isn't it possible, however, to write a program that says for those projects that have a date of, between January 1st, 2009 and December 31st, that the adjustment is X, and those projects after the adjustment is Y? I mean, it seems fairly simple.
May I just ask this? We're not giving out any money here.
Program?
I'll have our program people come over.
If I could say something, we're still having allocated funds, right? I don't see the immediacy of the decision. We have staff that's trying to figure out how they're going to implement the will of the board, and in that there's nothing go out in the meantime. Is this something that we could put over to the next meeting, have him bring back a comprehensive approach of how he would do this so that can help shape our I don't think it's going to change our outcome, but at least we will know going into it what it means as staff in implementing the will of the board. Would that be reasonable?
Rob, did you want to?
And don't know where the board would be on this. If the board were to apply the change to projects that are just simply unfunded approvals, as we have in the past, that changes where the money falls out for the money that we have to allocate. If the board splits it and, those that have unfunded approvals from 2009 are at the old amounts, we could then move that forward. But that decision kind of needs to be made now. Just for us to make that allocation at next month's board, that's all.
It really strikes me. I mean, it just really strikes me that we're almost arguing for not getting into the situation of where we are doing these unfunded approvals. If we're not part of the whole system is this adjustment, why are we even doing them? I think it begs the question, and we're making your list. It's always going to be Ms. Moore's list from now on in my mind, but it makes it more complicated, it sounds like, in terms of accounting and tracking. I mean, I would just argue that we're just in a weird time, and that this list is what the list is, and it's kind of a risk that the people who got unfunded approvals, have to take, and they should be cut. But I can tell I'm not winning that, so we can go ahead and move the question.
I have a suggestion as to how you can solve that problem. You're manually entering these rates into the computer, correct? And then the funding feeds off those rates. Is that what you're saying?
No, the rates are actually basically set in the system, and as we process a project, the numbers kind of self-calculate based on.
Why can't you not put the new rates into the system till you process the first January 1, 2010 approval? Wouldn't all the 2009 approvals then fund off the prior rates?
They certainly would. Any unfunded approvals we make from this point forward, though, are going to get an incorrect amount unless we manually. Although it's not a commitment, an unfunded approval is not a commitment of funding, but nevertheless, it will calculate at a different rate.
Are there any other questions or comments? We have a motion.
Could you restate the motion?
I think the motion was your motion. I think it is to go with option 1, adjusting the grant for using the M&S 8 California cities for all projects going forward after January 1st, 2010, and the projects that are already unfunded approvals would get the current rate. Okay, so do you want to?
Now, do we also have to decide on what that rate is? Because they gave us 2 options.
Well, that was included option 1.
Oh, that's in.
So does that mean that we are taking the higher of the 2 indices?
Which one are we taking?
I think it was option 1 is the 8 California cities.
Which is the higher than the other.
6.74 versus 6.22.
Yes.
Do you want? Is that your motion?
Well, I can talk about the rates later. It makes sense to me. I know if you were picking and choosing, you'd want the second option, but it makes sense to me to base California construction index on California costs and not have other states drive what our cost index is.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to? Staff, did you have something? We're good. Okay, call the roll.
Well, what are we good at? Just be clear. I know we're good.
We're good. We're really good. What we're good at is we have a motion on the table that we're going to, from this point forward, apply that. We're going to apply the 6.74% cut per the 8 California cities index, and then the stuff that's the unfunded approved will stay at the current rate.
People know what you know.
But it's the unfunded approvals in 2009.
Right.
What about the unfunded approvals that we approved earlier?
Well,
January. They were backdated.
They're backdated.
Yeah, some of those were already backdated to other dates.
Is it by the date they're backdated to, or is it by today's adoption?
I think you can. Yeah. I'm with you, Senator. No, I think apples and oranges on that. There's a group of consent projects that are dated today, and then there are the other ones that are still back in 2009, and all we did was shift their date within 2009.
Okay, so call the roll.
Senator Lowenthal.
Aye.
Senator Hancock. Aye. Senator Huff. Aye. Assemblymember Fuller. Aye. Assemblymember Brownlee. Aye. Assemblymember Buchanan. Aye. Scott Harvey.
Aye.
Kathleen Moore,
Aye.
Cynthia Bryant.
No.
It carries.
I said no. Did you get that?
I think there was someone that wanted to speak
I'm
to
sorry.
the item.
but
I'm
before we
sorry.
voted.
My projects were scheduled for last November and December, but it was canceled and they were pushed forward. So those 6 are on today's date. But yet, I already awarded them last year, so what do we do about me? Do I just go back and tell my board I'm sorry?
Okay. Item 15.
Okay. Item 15 is also an adjustment, statutory adjustment, in this case to developer fees. And this is an action that the board takes every 2 years and sets the level for developer fees associated with, again, the same construction cost index that we just took up. And I know that there's been a little bit of debate about the legal debate on this, and so I think it'd be appropriate to call on council at some point. But we're recommending that the adjustment be made according to the 8 California Cities Index. That would leave developer fees, they would decline by 1 cent from $2.97 to $2.96. Again, that's a this is driven off of there was a 6% construction cost index increase applied last year, a 6.7, in this case 6.74 decrease applied this year. It adds up to a penny per square foot on developer fees. Is the impact.
Okay, Council, did you want to pass out a memo? Do you want to address it or any?
The memo is basically in response to this letter that was addressed. Sorry. The memo is in response to the January 26th letter from the Coalition of Adequate School Housing, which basically they were of the opinion that these fees only could be increased, and that if the index would permit a decrease, we were precluded by the statute from decreasing it, that the statute only permits increases. And I looked at that opinion. Initially, I did actually read the statute like that, and after speaking with some of my other colleagues this morning, revisited it, and have now determined that the amount of the limits that says they'll be increased was only referring to the increase that was required in 2000. And that the way the statute was written, the second sentence that's talked about in every 2 years thereafter, according to the adjustment for inflation set forth in the state cost index for Class B construction, permitted it to be adjusted consistent with the state cost index, whether that would be up or down. And basically, that would be a reasonable interpretation, because I believe that the intent was to have the limits adjusted and consistent with the state cost-wide index, and that to interpret it to only permit increases would frustrate the purpose of the intent of the statute to maintain the level for funding for school construction at the current cost. So,
Mr. Duffy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Duffy again for Cash. I appreciate you referencing our letter, and we still read the statutes in that same manner. What school districts will do and typically do after you take action in January is to have a needs analysis done, but not for level 1 necessarily, but for level 2 fee. And so this is an important action. 1 cent isn't necessarily something to argue about, but I want to go back to something that you said under the last item, when you were talking about if districts hadn't received unfunded approvals, they would not have known. If we recommended to Rob and his staff and to the board last year that unfunded approvals be made so districts could continue to know what their projects would be at, to be able to encourage them to bid projects and help stimulate this economy. And one of the things that we did not do was for our member school districts who said the allocation board is not making apportionments, doesn't the government code say when the allocation board is not making apportionments because it has no funds that we're at level 3, which is doubling the level 2 fee? And we said that's exactly what the statute says, but this is not a good time to be dealing with the market in such a negative state. We've worked with CBIA, and we're tracking the new construction dollars that you have, and I will give you a chart that shows where it looks like you're going to run out of new construction dollars. But we have districts ask us this question of level 3. We don't control everyone. Somebody may file a writ at some time in the future, and they could do it tomorrow on this question, but we're asking districts to be patient. So this whole question of what is it that districts would be able to receive through the unfunded approvals is very important to keep the economy going and to continue to work with the development community and turn things around. One of the things that we've done is we've basically written to the governor saying, you've got $2 billion worth of projects that are out there. Let's put those on the street by selling more bonds. We want to encourage districts to do that. So on the topic of dropping the developer fee by 1 cent, that you're going to listen to your counsel, and that's understandable. But I wanted to make sure that I commented on level 3 because it's a reality that's in statute, and the state is not making apportionments, and somebody could make that argument. But we're not pressing that issue.
Okay. Can you explain level 3 to me, Rob, really quick?
Exactly what this side of the table also needs.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I decided I would risk.
Mr. Lyon can well explain level 3 developer fees.
I would prefer to explain level 3. What, I have the mic, Richard. When we
can have an explanation from Mr. Duffy and Mr. Lyon.
Of course. We work closely together. In 1998, we settled a number of issues having to do with the school facility program and basically reconstructed the program. Level 1 fees began in 1987, and it was a flat fee throughout the state of California. We identified that there were housing or building costs and land costs that were different in different parts of the state. If you're going to build in Beverly Hills, land's going to be a lot more than if you're building in somewhere, say, up near Modoc. So we came to an agreement that there could be a level 2 fee based upon the state pupil grant amount that was placed into statute with that bill, and that districts that had the ability, because of having eligibility, to seek state funds could then levy level 2 fees based upon their trying to match up with the state cost for the pupil grant as well as cost of land and the cost of developing the land. And so the state was a partner with districts and developers in that matter. We settled an argument over 3 appellate court decisions that were published decisions, so they had the force and effect of law. And those were called Hart and Murrieta. We said we'll set those aside in exchange for, if the state does not have bond funds to match up what you have at the local level with level 2 fees, that level 2 fees could double, and that doubling would be the whole grant amount, or that was the theory, to be able to build the schools in a time when there may be a bond failure. We had a bond failure in 1994, and it was very difficult for districts for that period of time. So what Government Code 65995.7 says, that is, if the allocation board has no funds with which to make apportionments, that the board sends a letter to the clerk of the assembly and the secretary in the Senate, and that is published in the daily record, and that triggers level 3 fees. And then districts at the local level can say to the developer, now you have to pay double what you were paying before.
Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Richard Lyon on behalf of the California Building Industry Association.
The issue on the agenda has nothing to do with level 3. It is the statutory level 1 fee, and on that issue, I'm not going to, bust a blood vessel arguing for a penny increase or a 3-penny decrease, except to say whatever the rules of the game have been in the past in terms of applying the construction cost index to the statutory fee should be the applicable cost measurement today, whether that goes up or whether that goes down. Consistency is important here. And we happen to agree with the council in terms of the read of the statute that it does not prohibit the fee from going down. On the level 3, it's a partnership for new construction funding. On the new construction side, it's a partnership. It's the state, it's school districts, and what the building community determined to do was to backstop the school district if the school district couldn't come up with 50 cents to match the state's 50 cents. And that was the deal. And in many cases, in new growth areas, districts are not able to go out and raise the appropriate revenue, so we backstop the district, and in many cases, we provide 50 cents to the state's 50 cents, and you build a school. There came a point in the negotiations on SB 50 when people were saying, well, that sounds like a great partnership, and we're ready to go, let's go do it. Then somebody said, well, what happens if the state's money isn't there? What happens if we no longer have state bonds? And in order to put a good partnership together, the home building industry stepped up and said, in the event, in that gap of time between the state no longer having funds and the next state bond, we would basically assume the state's position and pay 100% financing. Now, that was then, this is now. We are in a severe economic depression, and let me just give you a sense of how bad it is. We're down 83% from the high this last building cycle, which was 2004. What that translates to is we are under 177,000 units under what we did in 2004. We did 36,000 permits last year. We did 213,000 in 2004. So we have taken a precipitous drop in housing construction. It's showing up in the bids that are coming in, and it's showing up in the cost index. And it also puts a fine point on the fact that if we do reach the point sometime later this year when we're out of new construction money, it isn't politically or economically feasible to expect the home building industry to pick up the amount. And so we've been talking with Mr. Duffy and others in saying, how do we keep this program afloat? How do we keep it above water until the time we can get to a more secure funding source, be that a state bond or some other source? So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying level 3 is 100% financing on a home building community that is doing 36,000 units. We're not going to get very far on that.
So in lieu of any of that, we suggested that the allocation board make unfunded approvals, and they're continuing to do it, and we're tracking each month. So I've got a chart that we can share with you. And we want to resolve this issue. We're not in conflict. CBIA and Cash are not in conflict. We need to resolve this issue. And we talked to members, and we talked to their staff, and we've been actually doing this for about the last year and a half, anticipating that this is going to, not year and a half, but year and a couple of months, but anticipating this is a problem to resolve.
Okay. Yeah, does anyone have an objection if Ms. Orpez asks a question?
Clarification. Thank you. So, Mr. Lyons, would you agree that the statute actually says when the state allocation stops apportioning money or when the state allocation runs out of money?
It's, as I recall, when the state allocation board is no longer approving apportionments for new construction funding.
For which it has no funds.
And we went through this issue back in the Godinez times, back in the early 2000s, and there was a Attorney General opinion at the time from Mr. Lockyer that said that means that the state allocation board has to be out of money for new construction funding.
Right, out of money, not necessarily apportioning at
That's right.
any given point in time. So just want to clarify your issue about the requirement to...
You have $100 million, and we're happy about that, and we'd like to see that spent wisely. We know that you have no other bond funds at this time for which to make apportionments, but again, we're not making issue of that. I was responding really to your comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Assemblymember Buchanan?
I just want to say that it's clearly a problem we have to solve, because we all know that given today's economy, if we went to the point of assessing level 3 fees, and I've negotiated with developers and mitigation agreements or anything else, but if we went there, developers there would be no building, there would be no tentative maps, because the fees or the mitigation is negotiated, up front of the project. But given the item that's with us today and wanting to be consistent with the fact that we just approved funding based on the California cities, I'd like to move option 1.
Thank you very much.
Motion. We have a motion and a second. Go ahead and call the roll.
Senator Lowenthal? Senator Hancock? Senator Huff? Assemblymember Fuller? Assemblymember Brownlee? Assemblymember Buchanan? Scott Harvey?
Aye.
Kathleen Moore? Cynthia Bryant?
Aye.
Doesn't carry.
Okay. Well, should we, I guess motion fails?
No, place it on call.
Place it on call. We'll place it on call.
Yeah.
Item 16 or 17? 17.
Actually, it's, item 16. This is new construction grant adjustment. I have Josh Damath, who was part of the team that put together the report that you all have, and you may want to refer to. This is a separate report binder in front of you that has this document. I think Josh will be referring to it. And just to set the stage a little bit, Assembly Bill 127, which authorized Proposition 1D, created a discretionary authority for the State Allocation Board to increase the grants up to 6% or decrease those grants based on an analysis of construction costs. For many of the members who weren't with us at the time, there was an analysis done in 2007, 2008 that wasn't well received. And then subsequently the board in 2008 approved a 6% increase. At that point, the board has met its statutory obligations under the provision. The board has the authority, but no requirement to make an adjustment. But we have, through this last year, developed a new analysis on the question, and Josh will present that for you.
Hello, Josh Damath, Policy Analyst with the Office of Public School Construction. It's my honor to highlight for the State Allocation Board the findings of the OPSC's New Construction Grant Adjustment Report. I'm going to be starting on page 7, and so go ahead and, if you want to follow along, go ahead and turn there.
There should be a separate actual copy of the report that's at the dais for all the members.
Yep. Everyone have it? Okay. Yeah, and this report goes hand in hand with tab 14. It's so the context of this report is that every year grants are adjusted by a construction cost index. And as Rob said, AB 127 in 2006 gave the board discretionary authority to increase or decrease the new construction grants. What we've done is the statute also had the board create analysis of comparing the costs of new construction with the funding provided. We studied 166 new construction projects representative of the projects funded in the school facility program. The scope of our study was we defined it that we compared the amount of state funding with the self-reported costs by school districts of new construction projects. The study is based off self-reported data. The data set is the only one of its kind. It's currently the richest data set on public school construction costs in California's history. If you look at page 7 here, we've provided a chart. I just want to give the board a basic background. I know that this program began in 1998. It's very important to understand the context of context of how the grants are provided. So I'm on page 7.
It's a standalone report.
Yeah. It's a standalone report that was...
At the dais.
Underneath. I understand it, but didn't we just get the chart?
This... No, we basically brought an extra copy, so you would all have one here. But this was provided in November.
We just got this, so we're going to have to walk through this slowly.
Okay.
It's in the book, too, under Jeff's.
It is?
Yeah.
No, just the report.
This report was distributed.
Whoa.
Whoa. This report was agendized in November and was provided to all members in November.
But let me I can try to walk you through it.
Did you discuss it in November, or was it
No,
put over?
it was put over to this agenda, but it was distributed to all members of the board then.
Okay, so on page 7, we've basically provided a chart. State funding is provided to new construction projects in 2 categories. There is a per unhoused pupil grant, and there's also supplemental grants. The pupil grants, they are composite dollar figures. They were set in law in '98. Each grant represents an unhoused pupil based on the difference between a district's enrollment and the classroom capacity within the district. Supplemental grants are on top of that. They augment pupil grant funding. They're often multipliers to the pupil grant, so oftentimes changes to the pupil grant also affect changes to the supplemental grants, like Ms. Brown was talking about earlier. So I think it was it Santee, one of the districts. Okay, projects in the study that we studied, this is 166 projects. 64% of state construction funding was from the pupil grants, 36% was from the supplemental grants. The fundamental component of this program is that districts have to provide a match at least equal to the state funding provided. So if you look at the chart here on page 7, this starts in 1998. As you can see, the green line represents high school grants. Started between $6,000 and $8,000. It's climbed up to, in 2009, an amount higher than $12,000. So basically, since 1998, pupil grant funding has increased by 80% for elementary school and middle school grants and 75% for high schools. Since 2004, the increase has become more dramatic. Elementary and middle school grants have increased only since that time alone by 55% and 50%. So if you go to the next page, page 8, we've provided a chart on the supplemental grants. There's bar charts there. The blue lines represent pupil grant funding, and the other bar represents supplemental grant funding. I just wanted to show that supplemental grants have increased dramatically. In 1999, supplemental grants were 13%. In 2008, supplemental grants were 38%. So basically, a number of supplemental grants have become available to school districts. We're continually doing outreach, making districts aware of these supplemental grants, so they're going up too. Next, if you go to page...
Could I just ask,
yeah.
I presume something like a high-performance school is a supplemental grant?
Correct.
And
Yeah,
the
so
other ones would be like special ed classroom grants, CTE classroom grants, that kind of thing?
That would be a different program. If you look at page 9, we've listed all the supplemental grants here. So there's one. This is in order. Oh, well, the top section on page 9 is dependent grants, meaning that the amount is dependent on the pupil grant, and the bottom half of the page is independent grants, meaning that they're not dependent on the pupil grant amount. So you see, like, one of the highest ones is urban security. That's available to urban districts they're all for different excessive costs reasons. Like projects have extra added costs for specific project-specific reasons, and there's extra grants. For example, geographic percentage factor, for site development costs, fire sprinkler, all kinds of different things that districts can apply for supplemental grants. When you add them all up, to the overall funding, they're about 38%. So the pupil grant's only a part of it, is what we're trying to say. Okay, next, before we get to the main findings of the study, just wanted to go through the projects that were included in the study. So if you go to page 10, we've broken down in pie charts the types of projects that are included. These projects represent, just for context to everybody in the audience and the board, over 3,000 indoor facilities, 70 outdoor facilities were provided. This includes over 2,800 classrooms. Other facilities include multipurpose libraries, gyms, stadiums, performing arts, athletic fields. So we looked at all of these components of the projects. So if you look at the pie chart here, 67% of the projects that the board funded were additions projects, additions to existing school sites. 33% of the projects were new school sites. The next chart kind of shows the construction type. Looks like close to half of the projects were permanent construction. Half of the projects were portable, modular, or some combination of that. The next pie chart on page 11 shows that the project grade level. And we also broke down the projects. If you look at page 12, there's a regional breakdown of within these projects, which counties got how many dollars, how many dollars per classroom, etc. Just wanted to go through the range of these projects. There's a huge range of the projects that we studied. One project, for example, was one portable classroom of 960 square feet, ranging all the way to a whole complete new school. The square footage per pupil ranges from 36 square feet to 161 square foot per pupil. Cost per square foot ranges anywhere from $99 a square foot to $950 a square foot. State funding per square foot ranges from $53 to $379 per square foot, and the percentage of state contribution for these projects range from 17% all the way up to 109% state funded. Just to go over the key findings real quick. I'm starting on page 13. There's some problems that we came up with that we basically need to delve into a little deeper in order to get the answer to what we're looking for. We're trying to find out whether a grant adjustment is necessary. We're trying to find out what the state's responsibility is and liability to providing funding to school districts. One of the issues we found is that these projects are under local control, which is a fundamental tenet of our program. Districts have freedom to determine design and building components, including size, construction type, quality, and we acknowledge that local resources and available local funds obviously will factor heavily into these decisions. Under the lease purchase program of 1978, that lasted all the way until 98, so there was an old program before the current program where there was a square footage per pupil. There were more standards by which it was possible to judge what the state's responsibility was. Under this current program, we believe that standard does not exist. We cannot determine the state's responsibility and what they were needed to provide. The next page, that leads right into the next finding, is that we think that it's an unclear funding model. There's basically one thing that determines how these projects are funded. Basically, there's other things, but the number one thing is the number of classrooms. So if you build your square footage per pupil, your construction type, your added facilities, gym, multipurpose room, your type of construction, none of these things affect the funding provided by the state. It's basically a simple formula that's derived by, it's a kind of like a one-size-fits-all approach. And then the third thing that we found is a section on 15 says districts requesting all or a portion. A large